Why would the woman I once looked at as my own daughter be heartless enough to lock me inside an industrial freezer after I spent my whole life building a $55 million legacy for this family? Hello, my dear listeners. It is so hot in Houston today, and the heat really takes me back to those days right after Hurricane Beryl passed through, when everything was turned upside down, and we all realized who actually stands by you when the world falls apart. My name is Dorothy, and today I want to open my heart and tell you a story about betrayal and the long journey to find my own light again. Before we get started, if you believe that we as women always need to stay sharp to protect what we hold dear, please take a second to hit that like button or leave a prayer in the comments. Your company gives me the strength I need to relive the darkest hours of my life. Now come on back into the kitchen with me where it all began. I can still smell the sweet, buttery aroma of cornbread drifting through my kitchen that afternoon. I was humming a gospel tune while packing a little care package for my grandbabies, thinking about those educational building sets I saw on Amazon that I knew they would love. It was a simple, happy moment until Cassandra walked in, and the air just turned thick and cold. She did not even say hello. She just tossed a stack of bank statements onto the table, papers I had not seen in months because she had secretly changed the mailing address to her own. My heart started racing as I looked into her eyes, which were as cold as a winter morning. Cassandra told me she was tired of me wasting money on foolish things and announced that from now on, Michael would be the one managing every cent. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and my hands went so numb that I dropped my silver fork, watching it clatter and ring against the porcelain floor. The way she stood there, arms crossed and looking at me like I was a stranger or a gnarled old problem to be solved, hurt worse than any yelling ever could. She spoke so dañin about me getting confused and forgetting things, claiming that the $55 million my late husband worked his whole life to leave us was just too much for someone my age to handle. Everything around me started to blur, and even the sound of the documentary playing on PBS felt like it was miles away. I felt like a criminal in the very house I built with love, suddenly stripped of my voice and my dignity. This betrayal was not just about the money. It was the way she looked right through me, acting like all the years of love and trust I gave her meant absolutely nothing. That night, I just lay there in the dark listening to the steady, lonely hum of the air conditioner. Her words about me being confused kept circling my mind like a hawk, making me wonder for a split second if I really was losing my grip on things. I knew I had to find the truth. I needed to look back at my journals and my old memories to figure out how the girl I raised as my own daughter could turn so heartless. I sat there alone, my fingers tracing the worn edges of my wedding ring that had thinned over the decades. My mind drifted back to the stories my parents told about surviving the Great Depression and how we built this life and this wealth from absolutely nothing but hard work and faith. I remembered how I did not hesitate to pull out $50,000 to help Michael and Cassandra when they were struggling after Hurricane Katrina hit years ago, truly believing I was investing in my children's future. But now, looking at these ignored bills and the suspicious withdrawals Cassandra made under the guise of caregiving costs, my heart just aches. I finally see the truth. Every time she was sweet to me or massaged my arthritic hands, she was just setting the stage to make me sign papers I did not truly understand. The sadness in my soul is starting to turn into a slow, burning fire of indignation. I think about my precious jewelry that would suddenly go missing, only for Cassandra to find it in the most ridiculous places, like inside the freezer, just to prove I was losing my mind. She took advantage of my trust and my love for my family to carry out a calculated plan to take what belongs to me. Well, enough is enough. A cold determination is settling into my bones, a feeling I have not had in a long time. I will not let my husband's legacy be destroyed, and I surely will not let myself be turned into a ghost in my own life. I stood up and tucked my important documents away in a safe place, preparing for the first real step to take my power back. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a different woman. I was no longer waiting for Cassandra to show me some fake scrap of affection. I needed to breathe and find the rhythm of my own life again before these schemes swallowed me whole. I am going to start with the small things, the parts of myself I have ignored for far too long. I slid my feet into the comfortable Skechers I just ordered off Amazon, feeling that soft support cradling my tired feet. This morning, I did not sit by the window waiting for the sound of Michael's car. Instead, I took the keys and drove myself to the park. The bright Texas sun was peeking through the pine trees, and that early morning air felt so fresh and sweet against my skin. I stopped by Barnes and Noble to pick out a few new books, just soaking in the feeling of being free to decide how to spend my own time and money. I even treated myself to a new Kindle Paperwhite, hoping that being able to make the letters nice and big would let me keep up with my reading without worrying about my eyes. A deep sense of relief washed over me, a taste of the freedom that had been stolen away for so long. Later on, I picked up the phone and called Martha, a dear friend from church I had not talked to in months because Cassandra always told me I needed my rest. Hearing Martha's warm, familiar voice almost brought me to tears. We met up at a quiet little spot for lunch, sitting across from a longtime friend, sharing the usual aches and pains, but also the heavy things on my heart. I felt my spirit start to lift. Martha reached out and squeezed my hand, reminding me of the strength of the women in our community who have never bowed their heads to trouble. This connection was like medicine for my soul, a reminder that I am not alone and that there are still people who love me and will stand right beside me. Talking with Martha made me realize that the isolation Cassandra built around me was my heaviest chain. When I pulled back into my driveway, I saw Cassandra's car sitting there. I know she is not going to let this change happen without a fuss. She will probably try those sweet words again to pull me back under her thumb. But this time, I am ready. My sisters, have you ever felt your strength coming back just by calling a best friend or taking a walk on your own? If you believe that being independent is the key to our happiness, please leave a heart or comment with the word freedom. I truly want to hear about the moments you found yourselves again. As soon as I stepped through the door and felt the familiar warmth of my hallway rug beneath my feet, I saw Cassandra standing there, already waiting for me. She was holding that little brown bottle of vitamin D and calcium she always makes such a fuss about, acting like I cannot remember to take my own supplements. She asked me where on earth I had been all morning, her voice tilted in that way that sounds like worry, but feels like a demand. She told me she had been worried sick because the news was saying how inflation and the shaky economy in 2025 were making the neighborhood unsafe for older folks to be out wandering alone. Her tone was as sweet as peach cobbler, but her eyes were darting around, sharp and restless. I gently set my purse down on the side table, feeling my heart start to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. But I took a deep breath and kept my voice soft and level. I simply told her I had been out visiting an old friend and enjoying a little bit of the morning air. I saw her blink and pull back just a fraction of an inch, probably because she did not expect me to give her such a short, plain answer instead of the long explanation I usually offer up to keep the peace. Then she started shifting the conversation toward the money, doing it with that practiced ease of someone who knows exactly how to make you feel like you are the one being unreasonable. She let out a heavy theatrical sigh and started talking about how Michael was really feeling, the squeeze from the rising cost of living, and how it might be a smart idea to consolidate my savings accounts just to save us all on those pesky management fees. She told me she just wanted to ensure I had the most comfortable life possible without having to fret over all those dry, confusing bank numbers. She reached out and rested her hand on my shoulder, but I could feel the weight of it like a lead pipe. She was trying so hard to paint me as a fragile victim who needed her to handle the world for me, but I knew deep down she was just trying to take away the last bit of independence I had to my name. I took a deliberate step back, letting her hand fall away into the empty air, which was my way of drawing a circle around myself that she was not allowed to cross. I looked her right in the eyes, making sure she saw the clarity there, and told her I appreciated her looking out for me. But I had already spoken with the bank and everything was being managed exactly the way it needed to be. For a split second, I saw a flash of pure, red-hot anger in her eyes before she managed to tuck it back behind a tight, forced little smile. She started going on about how Michael was going to be so heartbroken if he thought I did not trust my own family to look after my interests. That old guilt trip was a road I had walked many times before. But this time, the pavement felt solid under my feet, and I did not stumble. I felt a new kind of power rising up from my heels, a quiet sort of firmness that was finally starting to crowd out that old, misty fear that used to keep me quiet. Cassandra tried to push me one more time, and this time, that sweet honey in her voice was completely gone, replaced by a sharp, jagged edge. She told me I was being difficult, and asked if I even had a clue how hard Michael had been working just to keep this whole house running for me. I did not give her the satisfaction of an argument. I just stood there in the absolute silence of the living room, watching her. It seemed like my silence was making her more nervous than if I had started shouting back at her. Finally, she let out a frustrated huff, turned on her heel, and marched out of the room, leaving me standing there by myself in the quiet. I knew this was just the first round of the battle. Cassandra is not the kind of woman who gives up until she has taken every bit of what she thinks she deserves, and I knew I had to move quickly to get my house in order before she came back with a different way to break me down. The kitchen door slammed shut with a heavy thud that made the pictures on the wall rattle. I knew Cassandra was not going to just let this go after I had looked her in the face and said no. The way I stood my ground today probably made her realize for the first time that the mother-in-law she thought she could move around like a piece of furniture was not there anymore. I have to get myself ready for when she really starts to show her teeth, because I have a strong feeling that the polite act is about to be over for good. That afternoon, I was just about to put the kettle on for some peppermint tea when I heard that dry, metallic click of the front door lock. Cassandra did not even knock. She just barged right into my home using that spare key I had given her back when I still believed her smiles were real. All that fake sweetness from this morning was gone, and her face was twisted with a kind of greed and anger that made her look like a complete stranger. She marched straight over to my desk, where I had been organizing my insurance folders, and demanded to know what on earth I thought I was doing. She barked at me, asking why I had frozen our savings accounts and if I had any idea how much Michael needed that money for his new investment. My heart started pounding against my ribs, but I did not back down. I stood up tall, feeling the steady grip of my Skechers on the floor, getting myself ready for a fight I knew had been coming for a long time. I looked her square in the face and told her that money was not ours to just throw away. I told her it was the legacy Mr. Whitman worked his fingers to the bone to leave for me and this family. Cassandra just let out a nasty little laugh that sent a shiver right down my spine. She told me I was getting old and could not even remember where I left my own glasses half the time. So how could I possibly think I was fit to manage all that wealth? Then she started rattling off all those times I supposedly forgot to pay the bills, The very same bills I now know she had been hiding from me all along. The way she mocked me and tried to make me feel small was like a cold, biting rain, a calculated attempt to break down the dignity I was trying so hard to find again. I realized right then that this was not just a disagreement. It was a cold-hearted plan to bully my spirit into submission. A heat started rising up in me, not just because she was insulting me, but because the betrayal was so deep and so cruel. I started listing every single thing I had ever sacrificed for them, from the money I gave Michael to buy this very house to the way I had quietly swallowed her snide remarks for years. I asked her if she really thought I was too blind to see those suspicious withdrawals or the way she had forged my signature on those checks. Cassandra went still for a second, her mouth hanging open, but instead of showing a lick of shame, she turned even meaner. She stepped closer and hissed that I was going to regret this. She told me that the money would be theirs one way or another, and that I would soon find myself rotting away in the cheapest, loneliest nursing home she could find. The mask was completely off now, and all that was left was raw, ugly greed. I watched as she started tearing through my desk drawers, looking for the documents she was so desperate to get her hands on. Seeing her violate my home like that was the final straw. I found a voice I did not know I still had, and screamed for her to get out of my house right this second. I pointed toward the door with a hand that did not shake, and it felt like the very walls of the room were vibrating with the force of my words. Cassandra stepped toward me like she was going to shove me out of her way, but I moved faster than she expected and gripped my heavy wooden cane tight. I told her she had no right to be in my space, and she certainly had no right to decide how I was going to live my life. My sudden strength seemed to catch her off guard, and for a heartbeat, I saw a flicker of real fear in her eyes before it was swallowed back up by her hatred. Cassandra started toward the door, but before she left, she turned back and let out one last threat that felt like a blade of ice. She told me not to think for a second that this was over. She said Michael was going to have to choose between his wife and his mother, and we both knew exactly who he would pick. The sound of that door slamming shut echoed through the house like a gunshot, ending the life I used to know. I collapsed into my chair, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps, and my whole body feeling like lead from the stress. The house felt so huge and empty all of a sudden. I was completely worn out, but deep down, there was a strange kind of peace. The line had finally been drawn. I knew I had officially declared war on her greed, and I knew I had to move fast before she could make good on those terrible promises. I forced myself to stand back up, even though my hands were still trembling, and went around checking every single window in the house. I realized that I was no longer safe in the one place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. I knew I needed to find a lawyer. I needed to change every lock on every door. And most of all, I needed to find a way to protect Michael from the web of lies his wife was spinning. I looked up at the photograph of my husband sitting on the mantel and promised him right then that I would not break. That burning anger I felt earlier had turned into a cold, sharp focus. I did not sleep at all that night. I spent those long hours planning how to protect myself, one step at a time, just like my husband taught me when he showed me how to keep the books for our family business all those years ago. I sat there in the dark, with only the soft glow from my Kindle lighting up a corner of the room. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a battle I was not supposed to win. But I was not that quiet, submissive woman anymore. I am a woman with a legacy to protect, and a soul that refuses to be bought or sold. Cassandra's betrayal had stolen my peace of mind, but it had given me a kind of iron strength I never knew I possessed. Tomorrow, I will start building my defenses. and I will not let anyone take my mind or my hard-earned life away from me ever again. The echo of that door slamming shut kept ringing in my head all through the night. I knew Cassandra was not going to stop at just words. She has a hunger in her that will not be satisfied until she has everything. To keep myself safe, I need to do more than just lock the doors. Tomorrow morning, the very first thing I am going to do is find myself some real legal help, someone who can build a wall around me that her greed cannot climb over. The next morning, I refused to let my pillow soak up any more of my tears. I woke up with a fire in my spirit, and the very first thing I did was reach out to a professional law office that specializes in protecting the rights of seniors just like us. Sitting in that cool, air-conditioned office with the Texas sun beating against the windows, while I stayed tucked away in the shade, made my heart feel a lot more steady. I looked across the desk at a lawyer with kind and understanding eyes, and I started laying out every single detail about the $55 million legacy my husband worked so hard to leave behind. I told him about the shady signs I had seen and how I suspected Cassandra had been forging my name on bank checks when she thought I was too tired to notice. Just saying the words out loud to someone who actually understands the law felt like a massive stone was finally being rolled away from my chest. I understood right then that legal protection was the very first wall I had to build to keep my own life under my own control. After I stepped out of that lawyer's office, I did not head home. I drove straight over to the Home Depot. I spent my time picking out the smartest and strongest locks they had on the shelf, and I did not leave until I had a professional scheduled to come out and change every single bolt in my house that very afternoon. That old silver key Cassandra had been carrying around like a badge of power is nothing but a useless piece of metal now. I also had them set up security cameras at the front porch and the back door, and I made sure I could see every single image right on the iPad I keep by my bed. Being able to see every corner of my own property and knowing that nobody can just barge in on me anymore made my breathing feel deep and regular for the first time in weeks. This is not about being scared or paranoid. It is about loving myself enough to protect the space where I have spent my whole life. Next on my list was the money, the very place where I had made the mistake of giving my children far too much power over my dignity. I went to my regular bank branch and sat down to open a brand new account that only has my name on it, and I moved every single penny of my savings over there where it belongs. I worked closely with the bank manager to cancel every old power of attorney and set up special alerts so that every single transaction sends a message straight to my personal phone the second it happens. The people at the bank were so patient with me, and they even helped me look back through all those suspicious withdrawals that I know for a fact I never authorized. Watching those numbers move back under my own watchful eye made me feel like I was truly taking the wheel of my life again. I am done being a bystander in my own story. I spent the rest of my afternoon going through all my monthly papers and services with a fine-tooth comb. I was shocked to find out that Cassandra had secretly signed me up for a mail-order pharmacy for my high blood pressure and cholesterol medicine, but she had the delivery address set to a P.O. box she was keeping all to herself. I got on the phone immediately and changed every bit of that information back to my own front door here in Houston. I did not stop there. I contacted the Social Security office to make sure my monthly benefits are going directly into my new account and nowhere else. Tending to all these little details made me feel sharper and more clear-headed than I have felt in a long, long time. This financial shield I am building is proof to the world that I am fully capable of looking after myself. The very last step of my long day was cleaning up my life in the digital world. I sat down and changed every single password for my email and my accounts on Amazon and Target, where I used to let the kids have access just to make things easier. I also made the hard choice to cut off all ties with Cassandra on social media, so she cannot track my movements or try to poison my spirit with those little sideways comments she loves to leave under my pictures. The quiet that came over my phone after that was a blessing I did not know I needed. I feel like my home has finally become a safe harbor again, a place where I can just sit and enjoy my life without having to look over my shoulder for another lie or another scheme to take what is mine. When the sun finally went down, I sat back in my big recliner and let the soft comfort of my Skechers soothe my feet before I finally slipped them off for the night. I looked around my living room, knowing the new locks were bolted tight, and those cameras were out there standing guard for me. Even though I know there are going to be more mountains to climb, having my own power back gives me a kind of strength that words cannot quite catch. I turned my old fear into a solid plan, and that made me feel like the strong, resilient woman I was always meant to be. I took a long, deep breath of the quiet air and felt real peace, ready for whatever the next day has in store. Those walls of protection are up now, and they give me the peace of mind I so desperately needed. But in the quiet of this house, I realize I cannot just live behind a fence forever. I need people in my corner, folks who will stand up with me when the truth finally has to come out. And right when I felt that need for a real connection, a warm hand reached out to me from the most unexpected place. I was standing on my front porch, watering my potted geraniums, when a soft knock sounded against the railing. It was Mrs. Henderson, my sweet neighbor who has lived right next door for more than 20 years. We have been through so much together, even leaning on each other during those hard, dark days after Hurricane Katrina devastated so many of our people. She was carrying a warm dish of freshly baked peach cobbler, and that sweet, sugary scent just filled the air around us. She looked at me with those kind eyes and told me she had heard some of the shouting the other day and had been worrying about me ever since. I just could not hold it in any longer, so I invited her inside and told her all about what Cassandra has been trying to do. Having Mrs. Henderson just sit there and listen to me without judging felt like a healing balm for my soul, reminding me that there are still good folks in this world who look out for one another. Not long after she left, my phone started buzzing with a call from Martha, an old friend from the church women's group I had reached out to a while back. Martha did not just call to say hello. She told me straight out that she would stand by me for whatever I needed, even if she had to walk into a courtroom and testify as a witness for me. She told me that I was not alone, and that she understood exactly how much I had given up for that family over the years. Feeling that strength from women of my own generation, women who know the true value of dignity and self-respect, made me feel 10 times stronger than I was before. I realized right then that I do not have to fight this battle in the shadows by myself anymore, because a real circle of allies is starting to form right around me. I spent the rest of that day feeling so full of gratitude. Just having people check in on my health, talk about the sticky Houston heat, or offer up a quiet prayer for my peace made me feel like I was a real part of this community again. Having Mrs. Henderson and Martha there for me completely washed away that heavy feeling of being isolated that Cassandra had been trying to wrap around me. I finally understand that no matter how much betrayal I face, there is still so much goodness and sincerity left in the world. With all this support at my back, I feel more ready than ever to face the hard truth and find those final pieces of proof I need to show everyone exactly what has been going on. The warmth from my friends gave me a strange kind of clarity that I had not felt in a long time. I knew I had to go looking for the cold, hard facts that Cassandra has been trying so hard to keep hidden in the dark. While I was tidying up some of my old keepsakes to find a little bit of peace, my hand happened to brush against a secret drawer tucked away under the stairs, a place where I found things I was never supposed to see. A terrible, heartbreaking secret was just sitting there, waiting for me to find it. My dear sisters, have you ever felt like a simple check-in from a neighbor or a friend saved your whole day from the darkness? If you believe in the power of our community standing together, please send me a greeting or comment with the word allies. I truly want to hear about the good people in your lives. While I was tidying up that small, dark cabinet tucked way back under the stairs, my hand brushed against a cold, little tin box that had been pushed deep into the shadows. I thought it might be some old Polaroids or maybe some recipe cards I had lost track of. But when I pried that lid open, I found a stack of clean, printed papers and copies of text messages and emails that Cassandra must have forgotten to destroy. As I started reading those lines, I felt the blood in my veins just turn to ice. It was a step-by-step plan to isolate me from everyone I love, detailing how she would tell people I was getting too frail to make my own choices. There was even a list of city and state agencies she was planning to call to report that I was no longer fit to handle my own life, including notes on how to trigger a mental health check from social services. Every single word on those pages was dripping with a cold, heartless calculation that treated me like nothing more than an old piece of furniture that needed to be cleared out so she could get her hands on the money. The more I read, the more I felt a deep, oily sense of disgust for the woman I had once welcomed into my heart as a daughter. She had actually been texting someone about how to get rid of the original deeds to this house and how to move my retirement money into some offshore account where I could never touch it. She even mentioned forging more signatures on documents that would give her and Michael full control over the legacy Mr. Whitman left behind. Every last bit of hope I had that Cassandra might have a shred of goodness left in her just crumbled into dust. The truth was ugly, and it made me feel physically sick to my stomach, but it brought a clarity to my mind that was as sharp as a razor. I finally understood that this was not just some family squabble or a misunderstanding about money. This was a systematic criminal plot designed to steal every bit of work my husband and I put in over a lifetime. I did not waste a single heartbeat. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of every single page and every text message in that box. My hands were not shaking from fear anymore. They were steady with a quiet, righteous anger that I could feel all the way down in my soul. I sent every one of those images straight to my lawyer with a short note that just said, "This is our weapon." I knew right then that those papers were the keys to bringing her whole house of cards down and protecting my dignity in the eyes of the law. I felt a surge of strength knowing that I had captured her own words to use against her greed. Having the truth right there in my hands changed everything. I was not a victim waiting for the next blow anymore. I was the one holding the winning card. After I hit send on that email, I just sat there on the floor with all those old memories surrounding me. But my mind was already looking toward the fight I knew was coming. Seeing the truth in black and white was the most painful thing I have ever gone through. But it finally set me free from doubting my own sanity. I realized that all those times I thought I was being forgetful were actually just moments where she had been gaslighting me and hiding the truth. I know Cassandra is going to realize her secrets are out soon enough, and she is probably going to come at me even harder. But as I sat there in the quiet of my hallway, I felt a strange sense of calm. I am ready for whatever comes next, because I know I am standing on the side of what is right, and the truth is something she can never take away from me. Finding out exactly what Cassandra had planned made everything crystal clear. But after those long, heavy hours of digging through those papers and facing that betrayal, I felt completely drained in my body and my spirit. I need to find a place where I can just breathe for a minute and remind myself why I am fighting this hard. There is only one place I can think of that still holds the kind of peace and love I need right now, and that is the place that belongs to the man who loved me more than anyone else in this world. The Houston sun was pale as I drove to the cemetery where Mr. Whitman has been resting under that old sturdy oak tree. My shoulders felt so heavy from all the days I had spent standing my ground against Cassandra. I sat down on the soft grass and let my fingers touch the cool stone. And suddenly, the memories of us making it through the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina back in 2005 came rushing back. We had lost nearly everything back then, but he just held my hand and told me that our greatest wealth was the kindness in our hearts and the resilient blood flowing through our veins. I felt my heart soften, and hot tears started rolling down my wrinkled cheeks, not because I was scared, but because I missed my partner so much, the man who was always my steady rock. In that quiet, sacred space, I started having a silent conversation with him in my soul. I told him about the $55 million legacy we worked so hard for and how it was being stained by someone else's greed. I remembered the lessons he taught me about staying sharp while we managed the family books together, and how he always told me never to let anyone take away my right to choose my own path. I could almost see him smiling at me, holding a glass of that dark southern sweet tea we both loved, and I felt a warm surge of energy move through me. That invisible comfort made all my loneliness melt away, replaced by a strange and solid determination. I realized then that I am not just fighting for money. I am fighting for the honor and the love we built together with our own two hands. I stood up and straightened my silk scarf, feeling the spiritual strength from my roots rising up inside me. His words were like a guiding light, washing away any last bits of doubt I had about Cassandra. I refused to let this betrayal break me because I carry the pride of a woman who has survived so much history already. Before I walked away, I placed a fresh branch of flowers on his grave and promised him I would protect our legacy and keep things right for Michael. A sense of peace started to settle into my spirit as I took a deep breath, getting myself ready for whatever new scheme Cassandra is cooking up in the dark. As I walked out of that cemetery, my heart felt light, even though my mind was as sharp as a tack. I know Cassandra is not going to stop at just trying to take the money. She is going to come for the most precious thing I have left, which is my own mind. The second I got into my car, a strange number started flashing on my phone, and I could feel in my bones that a new storm was about to hit my life. The next morning started out so peaceful, just the way I like it. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying a glass of ice-cold sweet tea and watching the dragonflies dance in the Texas heat, when a series of loud, frantic knocks hammered against my front door. It was not the gentle tap of a friend or the steady knock of the mailman. It was the kind of sound that makes your heart drop straight into your stomach. When I opened the door, I did not see Cassandra. Instead, I was staring at a woman in a stiff blazer holding a clipboard and a man in a white coat who looked like he had never smiled a day in his life. They introduced themselves as a social worker and a doctor, and they told me they were there because someone had filed a serious report claiming I was showing signs of advanced dementia and could no longer look after myself. The feeling of being violated in my own home was like a physical blow to the chest. My heart started racing, and a hot wave of anger washed over me when I realized this was the next low-down move Cassandra was making. They asked to come inside to perform a mental health evaluation right there in my living room, the very place where I had raised my family and hosted 1,000 Sunday dinners. Suddenly, my sanctuary felt like an interrogation room, and I could feel their prying eyes searching every corner for a reason to take my freedom away. I felt like I was being pushed into a corner, trapped inside my own life while complete strangers prepared to judge the state of my soul. Before I could even gather my thoughts, Cassandra pulled into the driveway and hurried inside, putting on the performance of a lifetime. She walked in with her eyes all watery, her voice trembling as she started telling them how worried she was about poor Mother Dot. She started rattling off all those lies about how I had been forgetting to pay the bills and how I was tucking my good jewelry away in the freezer like a confused child. I sat there on my old floral sofa, watching her act out this perfect little tragedy, and I felt a deep, oily sense of disgust. She even had the nerve to pull out a couple of prescription bottles for Alzheimer's medication that I had never seen before in my life, claiming she had found them hidden under my mattress. For a split second, seeing the way that social worker looked at me with pity and doubt, I felt a terrible sense of helplessness. They started asking me if I knew what day it was and what I thought about the way inflation was hitting the grocery stores lately, trying to see if I was still connected to the real world. But I was not about to let her win this one. I took a slow, deep breath and pulled my phone out of my pocket, calling the lawyer I had spoken to just the day before. While we waited for him to arrive, I stayed perfectly calm and answered every single one of their questions with a voice as steady as a church bell. I did not just tell them I was fine. I showed them. I pulled up my new bank account on my phone and showed them the receipts from my latest trip to Walmart, pointing out exactly how much I spent and how I was managing my own budget down to the last penny. I told them straight out that Cassandra had been the one hiding my mail and planting those pills just to make me look like I was losing my mind. I could see Cassandra starting to get real fidgety, that fake, honeyed smile on her face beginning to crack around the edges when she realized I was not the confused old woman she wanted me to be. I told that doctor I was more than happy to do a full evaluation, but it would be at a hospital of my own choosing with a doctor I actually trusted, not someone she had brought to my doorstep. The air in that living room got so thick and heavy, you could almost taste it. The social worker started taking notes a lot faster when I brought out the copies of the messages I had found in that tin box under the stairs. I watched the look on her face change when she read Cassandra's own words about how she was going to isolate me and take control of the house. Cassandra started to shake, and I could see the scream building up in her throat. But the presence of my lawyer and the cold, hard facts kept her quiet. I felt a surge of invincible strength rising up through my spine. I stood up tall and looked that doctor right in the eye, letting him see the fire and the clarity that was still very much alive in me. I was not a victim anymore. I was a woman standing in her truth and exposing a cold-hearted plot to strip me of my dignity and my life right in front of the authorities. This was a battle for my very soul, and I was not going to let myself fail. That questioning went on for what felt like forever, and by the time it was over, I was completely worn out. But my spirit was still standing strong. I told them all about how I had been taking care of my own health, from buying my Skechers to keep me moving to the yoga classes I had been attending at the community center. Those little details of a life well lived were the strongest proof I had that my mind was as sharp as ever. Cassandra kept trying to jump in with more lies, but my lawyer shut her down every single time. I saw the social worker's eyes move from me to Cassandra, and I could tell the pity she had for me was turning into a deep suspicion of my daughter-in-law. It was a long, hard afternoon, but the truth has a way of cutting through the dark like a flashlight. Finally, they told us that while they would need to do a more formal follow-up to close the file, it was clear that I was perfectly capable of handling my own affairs. Cassandra tried to start up one more threat, but I did not let her finish. I told her to get out of my house right then and there, and I made sure she did it while everyone was still standing there watching. Once the door finally closed behind them and the house was quiet again, I sat back down and felt the sweat soaking through the back of my blouse. The psychological pressure of having to prove my own sanity was almost more than I could bear, but I had won that first real round. I had shown them that I was not some helpless, confused thing to be cast aside. And I had dealt a heavy blow to her plan to use my own health against me. I sat there for a long time, just breathing deep, trying to let the tension leave my muscles. I eventually went to the kitchen and treated myself to a piece of that peach cobbler Mrs. Henderson had brought over, savoring the sweetness and the kindness behind it. All that anger I felt earlier had turned into a very clear and solid plan of action. I know the next step is going to be in a courtroom where all this betrayal will finally be brought out into the light of day for everyone to see. I looked out the window and noticed the wind was starting to pick up, making the trees sway the same way they did right before Hurricane Beryl hit us. But this time, I am ready for the storm. I have my evidence, I have my friends, and I have a heart that is not going to break no matter how hard the wind blows. That attack on my mind failed, but it showed me just how deep Cassandra had sunk into her own greed. This fight is not just staying inside these four walls anymore. I just got word from my lawyer that she is officially filing for guardianship, trying to use the law to lock me away. It is time for me to step out into the light of justice with my allies by my side. We are heading for that final confrontation in court, and I am going to make sure the truth is heard once and for all. My sisters, has anyone ever tried to make you feel small or doubt your own mind just because you have a few years on you? If you believe that our wisdom and our sharp minds are our greatest treasures, please send me a word of encouragement or comment with the word resilient. I want us to stand together and stay strong. The court summons sat quietly on my dark wood dining table, its weight feeling like a formal declaration of war against the peace I had spent my whole life building. Sitting across from my lawyer in an office crowded with tall stacks of files and the lingering scent of morning coffee and old paper, I felt a heavy wave of anxiety at the thought of airing my family's private pain in front of a room full of strangers. There is a certain kind of shame in our community when it comes to family business, a feeling that we ought to keep our struggles behind closed doors. But as I looked down at the hard evidence of Cassandra skimming money from my retirement funds and those forged signatures she thought I was too tired to notice, a strange and solid sense of calm started to settle into my bones. I realized this was the only path left to get the justice I had earned through years of hard work. My lawyer reached out and gave my hand a steady, grounding squeeze, telling me to put my faith in the truth and in the cold, hard numbers we had gathered, because numbers do not have a soul to corrupt, and they surely do not have the heart to lie to your face. Cassandra's side tried to throw a curveball at the very last minute by sending over a settlement offer through their own attorneys. They actually had the nerve to suggest I hand over control of $30 million to them in exchange for them dropping that terrible guardianship lawsuit. It was a slick little trap, nothing more than a blunt attempt to put a price tag on my dignity and the clarity of my own mind. I did not need even a second to think it over before I told them no to every single word of it. I told them straight out that I would not sell my husband's honor or my own sanity for any amount of money they could ever hope to put on a piece of paper. I have lived too long and worked too hard to let someone buy my silence with my own money. That firm stand seemed to catch them completely off guard, and for the first time, I could feel the power shifting. I could feel my own heart getting ready for the final showdown in that courtroom, no longer as a victim, but as a woman standing in her full authority. We spent the whole evening going over our secret weapon one more time, that old tin box that had become my shield, filled with Cassandra's cruel and calculated messages. I sat there in the quiet of the office, remembering the precious jewelry of mine that had gone missing over the last few years, including the gold locket that belonged to my mother. I now knew she had secretly pawned those pieces off just to fund those risky investments she had no business making with my legacy. My lawyer took every little detail, every suspicious withdrawal, and every forged check, and wove them into a rock-solid story that exposed her as the financial predator she really is. Someone who had been hiding behind a mask of family love while she picked my pockets. I felt surprisingly peaceful as we worked, like that heavy, still air you feel right before a big Texas thunderstorm breaks the heat. I was not that hurting, confused mother-in-law anymore. I was a woman ready to take back the legacy of my entire life and the honor of the Whitman name. The next morning, I woke up before the sun and got myself ready in my finest navy blue Sunday dress, the one that always made me feel like I could handle anything the world threw at me. I carefully put on the pearl necklace Mr. Whitman gave me for our 40th anniversary, feeling the cool weight of each bead against my skin like a promise of his continued protection. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw an African-American woman with eyes full of strength and a spirit that refuses to be broken by greed or lies. The memories of being betrayed did not sting like they used to. Now, they were just the fire that kept me standing tall and focused. Michael called me just as I was heading out, his voice sounding so heavy and full of a deep, honest regret I had not heard in years. He promised he would finally be standing there in that court with me, ready to face the truth of what his wife had done. Hearing my son finally wake up to the reality of the situation was the best medicine I could have asked for my weary heart. I picked up my folder of papers, took one last look at our family home, and walked to the car with the heart of a woman who is ready to let justice have the final word. The car moved slowly through the busy Houston streets as the morning traffic buzzed all around me, but inside the car, it was perfectly still. I looked out the window at the people rushing to work, realizing that today, my only job was to stand up for the truth. Every bit of preparation was done, and every piece of evidence was tucked safely inside my lawyer's briefcase. Ahead of me were the tall doors of the county courthouse, the place where the law would finally be called to witness my story. I knew it would be painful to tell the world about the betrayal I suffered, but I also knew that standing up was the only way to find my way back to the light. I am ready to tell my story of pain and the strength it took to rise back up, and I am ready for the world to listen. The courtroom was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop on that heavy oak floor as the judge made his way to the bench. I sat there at the plaintiff's table with my back straight and my hands gripped tight around my purse, feeling the weight of every single prayer I had whispered since this nightmare began. Across the aisle, Cassandra looked as polished as a new penny in her expensive business suit, acting like she was the one who had been wronged. But I could see the way her fingers were twitching and how her eyes kept darting toward the exit, like she was looking for a way out. The trial started with her lawyer spinning a tall tale, trying to convince the room that I was just a poor, confused old woman who did not know my left from my right anymore. He talked about how I was supposedly throwing away our family legacy on foolish things, and how I needed them to step in and save me from myself. Hearing those lies told right there in the house of the law made my heart hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. But I took a steady breath and felt the cool strength of my pearl necklace against my skin, reminding me of the woman Mr. Whitman always knew I was. Then my lawyer stood up, and it felt like the whole room shifted. He did not raise his voice or start shouting, but every word he spoke had the solid weight of the truth behind it. He started laying out the bank statements we had worked so hard to gather, showing the judge exactly where those huge sums of money had been going, and pointing out the signatures that looked like mine but were clearly forged by someone much younger and much greedier. He told the judge that this was not a case of a confused grandmother, but a calculated and cold-hearted financial trap set by someone who was supposed to be family. I watched Cassandra's face go as pale as a sheet of paper when he started showing the messages from that old tin box, the ones where she had literally written down her plan to make me look like I was losing my mind. The truth was being peeled back in front of everyone, revealing the rot that had been hiding under the surface of our family for far too long. The most powerful moment of the whole day was when they called me up to that witness stand. I walked up there with my head held high, took a slow breath of that stale courtroom air, and looked that judge right in the eye. I did not use any angry words or try to shout her down. I just told my story with every bit of dignity I had left in my soul. I talked about the Sunday dinners that she had turned into cold interrogations and the deep stinging pain of being locked away in my own room by a girl I had treated like my own flesh and blood. I told them that the $55 million my husband left behind was not just a pile of money to be fought over. It was the blood, sweat, and tears of a lifetime of honest work and a promise of a future for our grandchildren. I could feel the whole room leaning in to hear me, and for the first time in years, I knew people were finally seeing the real Dorothy Whitman again, instead of the shadow Cassandra had tried to turn me into. Then came the moment that changed everything. Michael was called to the stand, and I watched my son walk up there with his head down and his eyes all red and puffed up from crying. When he looked at the evidence of what his wife had been doing behind his back while he was busy working, I saw something in him finally break. He told the court that he had been a blind fool and that he had let himself be manipulated by lies. And then he spoke up for me with a voice that was full of a deep and honest regret. He told the judge that I was as sharp as I had ever been and that he was the one who needed to answer for being so gullible. Seeing my boy finally wake up to the truth was the greatest victory I could have ever asked for, even more than the money or the house. Cassandra started losing her mind right then, jumping up and screaming lies at the top of her lungs. But the judge hammered his gavel down so hard it sounded like a thunderclap and told her to sit down and be quiet before he had her removed. But the biggest shock of the day came when my lawyer brought up some information from the police about Cassandra's history. It turned out she was not just a greedy daughter-in-law. She was a professional scammer who had done this exact same thing to older folks in 3 other states before she ever laid eyes on Michael. The whole room started buzzing like a hive of disturbed bees, and Cassandra just collapsed into her chair and buried her face in her hands because she had run out of lies to tell. Her whole plan to steal my husband's hard-earned legacy was laid bare for the entire world to see, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. I did not feel any joy in seeing her fall, but I felt a deep and soul-shaking relief that my dignity had been protected and that the Whitman name would finally be cleared of all the mud she had tried to throw on it. Finally, the judge leaned forward and gave his ruling with a voice that was as firm as a foundation stone. He threw out every single bit of her guardianship request and ordered all her personal accounts to be frozen so the authorities could investigate her for fraud and elder abuse. He gave me full and total control over my own life and every cent of my inheritance, saying it was clear as day that I was more than capable of looking after myself and my family. When that gavel hit the desk for the very last time, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders and I just broke down in tears of pure and honest relief. Michael ran over and pulled me into a long hug, whispering his apologies over and over into my shoulder until I could finally find my breath again. The storm had finally blown over, and I was still standing tall. I walked out of that courthouse and stood on the top step for a good long minute, just breathing in that bright and warm Houston air. The noon sun was shining down so golden and beautiful, and it felt like a blessing on my head for having the strength to finish the fight. I felt whole and steady in my own skin, and the sting of that betrayal was finally starting to fade now that the truth had been spoken in the light. I looked up at the big blue Texas sky and whispered a quiet thank you to Mr. Whitman, knowing he had been watching over me and guiding my steps from the other side the whole time. I know my life is going to be quiet and different from here on out, But for the first time in a long time, I can see a future that is full of peace and real joy. I am ready for my new beginning, and I am finally, truly free. It has been some time now since that day in the courtroom, and I finally did what I needed to do for my own peace of mind. I sold that big house in Houston, the one that had started to feel more like a museum of old heartaches than a home, and I moved myself down to a beautiful, sun-drenched condo right near the water in Florida. Now, I spend my days doing exactly what I want to do. I finally started taking those river cruises I used to only see in magazines, feeling the cool breeze on my face as I glide down the water, seeing the world with fresh eyes. Every single morning, I wake up to the gentle sound of the waves and spend my time reading on my new Kindle or just tending to the bright flowers on my balcony. Michael brings my grandbabies down to visit me all the time, and we sit around the table sharing big, noisy meals filled with nothing but love and honesty. There are no more lies hiding in the shadows, and no more greed poisoning our time together. I feel like I have been given a second youth, living a life that is finally light and free because I had the courage to stand up and claim it for myself. Looking back at the long road I had to walk, I realize now that the greatest legacy Mr. Whitman left me was not those $55 million. The real treasure was the self-respect and the iron-strong resilience I found deep inside my own soul when I was pushed to the edge. My dear sisters, please listen to me when I tell you this. Do not ever let your age or even your love for your family blind you to the truth when something feels wrong in your spirit. You have to stay sharp and protect your right to make your own choices, because the world will only treat you with the same respect that you give to yourself. To every one of you listening today, just remember that the light of the truth will always be stronger than the darkness of greed. And every single one of us deserves a quiet, peaceful beginning after the storm has passed. Stay strong, keep your faith, and never ever let anyone take your voice away from you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. It means so much to have you here. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with a sister who needs to hear it. We are never alone when we stand together. Stay strong. Keep your light shining and stay blessed until next time.